and you want to talk about testing your mettle and making you look deep inside and wondering, am I right? Am I just being stubborn? Am I believing in something that is really the right thing to believe in and to hold on to? And I kept telling myself, yes, yes, yes. Finally, one of three geniuses I've ever worked with in my life came into my career in the form of Tim Burton. Tim Burton and another genius, Anton Furst, my dear friend who's no longer with us. Anton was the production designer who won the Oscar for the first Batman film, who had the great vision. It was Tim Burton who understood that if we were to do what would be revolutionary at the time, the first dark, serious comic book superhero movie, from the opening frames, the audience better believe in Gotham City, and Gotham City better be the third most important character in this piece in order to make it work. Because if audiences didn't first believe in Gotham City, they would never believe there could really be a guy getting dressed up in a batsuit fighting somebody like the Joker. Couldn't be. That was genius. The script came in from Sam Hamm. There was only one line describing Gotham City. It was the first line of the script. It said, "Gotham City, as if hell has erupted from under the earth." And Anton turned to Tim and said, "What does this mean?" And Tim said to Anton, "Well, I think this means New York City had there never been planning and zoning." Anton says, "I get it." He goes off and does his research. He comes back with the designs of Gotham City, the Batmobile, the whole look of the picture. It was absolutely incredible. And then came the most wonderful day of my life up to that point, I think, when I heard Jack Nicholson was officially hired to play the Joker. I had been campaigning for years, and as of 1988, was firmly convinced that Jack Nicholson was the only actor who could play the Joker. And I was on cloud nine. 10 days later, one of the execs calls me and says, "So Michael, what do you think of Tim's idea? Michael Keaton to play Batman." So I laughed. I said, "That's great. Sure." I said, "I've just been spending 9 years of my life to work to bring a dark and serious Batman to the screen. Let's get a comedian to do it. Mr. Mom is Batman." I can picture it now. It took them 20 minutes to convince me this was not a joke. And then I went crazy. I was apoplectic, as were many fans at the moment. And my first reaction was, this can't be. And I said to Tim Burton, "He's a comedian. He's not a serious actor. He's my height. He doesn't have the muscles. And by God, he doesn't have a square jaw." And it was Tim, again, let's talk about genius, who said, "Michael, a square jaw does not a Batman make when we're transposing from one medium to another. In fact, it's not even about Batman. This is all about Bruce Wayne." He said, "I have to be able to convince an audience, if we want them to believe seriously in a dark superhero, that Bruce Wayne is a guy so obsessed, so driven to the point of being psychotic, that audiences will say, yeah, that guy would get in a suit like that and go out and fight crime." He said, "Do you agree with me now, with Nicholson hired to play the Joker, we can't get an unknown actor to play Bruce Wayne? Nicholson will wipe the screen with him." I said, "I totally get it." He says, "Well, let's look at our serious actors list." All right, this was around 1988. Dennis Quaid, Harrison Ford, Kevin Costner. He said, "I don't know how to get any of these guys into a bat costume without getting unintentional laughs from the audience. I don't know how to do it. But with Michael Keaton, we can create that portrayal of Bruce Wayne that will sell this picture to the masses as the first serious superhero movie." Well, they had to set up a screening of the rough cut of Clean and Sober to prove to us that Michael was actually a great serious actor. And the second I saw it, I realized everything Tim said was right. I said, "But what about his height? What about the musculature?" He said, "I can cheat the height. We can carve musculature into a suit. That doesn't matter. I can make it work." And by God, the genius of this man, it worked. That first movie, for those of you who weren't around to see it on the big screen, was revolutionary. And every comic book movie and genre movie since has been influenced by it. Whether it's by Tim's look, Anton's tone, Danny Elfman's music, you can still hear that stuff and see that stuff reverberating in comic book films today. Well, that first movie came out. It was a huge, huge success worldwide. Broke so many box office records. And my phone rings, and it was the guy from 10 years ago, the Robin and Marion guy. And he calls and he goes, "Michael, I'm just calling to say congratulations on Batman. I always said you were a visionary." That was my next epiphany. If you don't believe them when they tell you how terrible you are and how bad your ideas are, but then if you don't believe them when they tell you how wonderful you are and how great your ideas are, and just continue to believe in yourself and in your work, you'll do just great. But I told you there have been 3 geniuses that I've had the pleasure of being involved with in my projects. There is a genius by the name of Christopher Nolan. This is a filmmaker who is and should be the first filmmaker of the 21st century studied in film schools. This is the man who succeeded with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight in raising the bar for all comic book movies. When you walk out of Dark Knight, no longer do you have to say, that was a great comic book movie. You can finally say, this is a great film. And he has raised that bar. What's the genius behind it? Well, the way I see it, and this is my perception, is he chose to go a completely different way that Tim Burton chose to go. And as a result, he had 4 or 5 incredible creative challenges that he had to overcome. And he wanted to take this realistic approach. He needed to convince audiences that Bruce Wayne was real, that a person in our crazy world today could actually take the journey Bruce Wayne took and actually become Batman. That's an incredible job. But if you see, starting in Batman Begins, his journey, which feels like Lost Horizon, more than a comic book film, you come to believe in Bruce Wayne, who is nailed by Christian Bale. I don't care what generation of Batman reader you are, from the 40s, the 60s, the 90s, Christian Bale nails it. Challenge number 2, Gotham City. Well, Tim wanted to create a universe. But I think in the genius of Christopher Nolan, he saw that this had to be a real city. And if he had shot it in New York, the first second you see Times Square or Central Park or the Statue of Liberty, bam, it's New York City, goodbye suspension of disbelief, and you're pulled out of it. But you take Chicago and take maybe 2 iconic buildings out of the skyline, and most people around the world will not know where that is. Gotham City comes to life. Point 3. The Joker. Now, what Tim Burton did was he showed the comic book version of the Joker. It was a comic book world, pure and simple. It was black and white, good versus evil, the clown prince of crime versus Batman. But in the Christopher Nolan films, it is our world today, which is no longer black and white, but very gray. This is no longer really a battle of good versus evil as much as it's order versus chaos. And the fact that he and the brilliant Heath Ledger were able to craft the performance of a lifetime in convincing all of us that this Joker character is a terrorist, a homicidal maniac who unfortunately actually could exist in the world we live in today. That was unbelievable to make that feel real. And then maybe came his hardest challenge of all. He had to convince all of you that all this crazy, wacky technology was real. Now, how do you do that? He hired Morgan Freeman to tell you it was real. Well, if Morgan Freeman says it's true, it's got to be true, by God. Genius. Genius. I love the way so many critics talked about The Dark Knight as being the most important post-9/11 movie to come along. I love seeing how both the left and the right have attempted to claim The Dark Knight as theirs. It's very, very interesting stuff. And before we switch to Q&A, I want to tell you and wrap this up with just 2 short things. My inspiration for all of this was my father. My dad was a Mason. My dad dropped out of school in Bayonne, New Jersey at age 16 to help his family survive the Depression, and he worked 6 days a week the rest of his life well into his 80s. What he did with brick and stone and marble, fireplaces and homes and the fronts of homes and walls was amazing. He loved what he did. Every morning my dad jumped out of bed before dawn, big smile on his face, couldn't wait to get to work. If it was snowing outside, he built a fire and he worked. If it was 95 degrees, New York, New Jersey humidity, he was out there working. When you grow up in a house like that and see somebody who is so in love with his work, how could you not want that for yourself? So my brother and I started working summers for him, tarring foundations, carrying bags of cement. It was horrible. And that's where we had our